Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Remarkable Coach podcast. I'm your host, Micheal Pacheco, and today with me I have Nadine Hack. Nadine is CEO of Because Global Consulting. She's a senior board advisor at Global Citizen Circle and the first female executive in residence at the IMD Business School. Nadine, welcome to the podcast.
It's my pleasure to join you, Micheal.
Thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate it. Let's just kind of start off with a pretty broad question. Just kind of introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about what you do and why you do it.
Well, as you know, I'm right now writing a book, The Power of Connectedness, with a foreword by Desmond Tutu, because I believe that connectedness is everything. I'm inspired by the Welsh proverb, she who would be a leader must be a bridge, because wherever anyone is, it's vital to learn how to bridge divides, as our world is profoundly interconnected. Now, sadly, we also live in a time of great polarization, but there have always been advocates of inclusion, even when vitriolic voices, crave to divide us versus them. And so that's why I keep doing the work that I do.
Mm-hmm.
I want to be one of those voices.
Love it. I love it. That's great. You mentioned Desmond Tutu as one of he's doing the foreword to your book. He's a Nobel laureate, is that right?
That's correct.
And how did you connect with him?
Oh, so I met the Arch, as I fondly call him, in the 1970s. I became active in the American Civil Rights Movement in the 1960s. And for me, because I think globally and I think interconnectedly, that led very naturally for me to become involved in the 70s in the anti-apartheid movement and other liberation movements throughout the world, human rights movements. So we met in the 70s. We stayed, closely connected for all these decades. In fact, he performed my Catholic husband and Jewish me were married by Anglican Desmond Tutu, performing the ceremony in Kosovo. So
I love that. What a great mingling of everything.
And then I had the honor to chair a peace foundation that he set up, and we remain friends with him and his whole family to this day. Yeah.
That's awesome. That's great. Tell us a little bit about what got you into coaching or consulting. Do you prefer to be called a coach or a consultant? I know there's a little bit of crossover.
I wear so many hats that you can call me whatever you like.
You know what I like
to be called? I like to be called a connector.
A connector. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, I've been using that more and more. Like, who are you? I'm a connector. Because I have so many hats. I'm a consultant, I'm a coach, I'm a CEO, I'm an author, I'm a speaker, but I think that the thread that runs through all of them is my desire to bring different people, different issues, different perspectives together. Because the lack of understanding among people of differing backgrounds and privileges, or the lack of privileges, is what drives social movements with a demand to be seen, heard, cared about, and treated as equal, which is pretty fundamental common needs for all of us. And actually, I believe the same dynamic plays out within our enterprises. So think about it. Top executives, senior managers, teams and business lines often don't have a sense of being understood, sometimes not even listened to by each other. So, and I believe that regardless of what goals you seek to achieve professionally or personally, you can't do anything alone. You have to engage with others. We're inextricably interconnected, whether we like it or not. So much of the work I do as a coach, as a consultant, as a speaker, as a teacher, as a, all those other hats.
As a connector.
is being a connector and teaching about connecting and sharing lessons for and processes of connecting.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Why did you choose this path?
I think this path chose me.
Love it. I love that answer. Tell us more about that.
As far back as I can remember, I mean, as far back as I have conscious memory, well, even on the family level,
Mm-hmm.
like I would save my allowance money so that when it came to Mother's Day, I could buy presents, not from my mother and my grandmother and my aunts. I mentioned that my husband is Irish Catholic. I'm Russian Jewish. In my family, it was as if the entire shtetl uprooted from what was then Russia, now the Ukraine, and relocated in an apartment building in Brooklyn where I grew up. So I had this intergenerational, my Bubby and Zadie and their Aunt Razel and Aunt Bella and a whole cast of characters, and I really cared about, and my Bubby taught me a lesson when I was very young. She taught me that when I would go to the bakery to buy bread, I should ask the baker what today's bread cost and what yesterday's bread cost. And then I should buy yesterday's bread, and whatever pennies I saved, when I came home, we had a jar on top of the refrigerator that she called the icebox. And I was to put the pennies into that to be given charitably to people who had less than we did. And so it was kind of and then as a student, I was just so drawn to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s concept of the beloved community, Martin Buber's idea, the I-thou relationship. It's just something that resonated with me deeply. And even my social activism. I mean, when I was 12, I learned that the local branch of the Brooklyn Public Library was going to be closed. And without any adult giving me the impetus to do it, I created when you go around and you ask people to sign something, it is
petition.
called
Petition.
Thank you. Anyhow, the only way that I know that I'm 7 decades into my life is my mind is operating at the top of its intellectual game. I'm pulling from more places, sources, integrating more information, but sometimes word retrieval, and not complicated words like juxtaposition, like words like petition, or even simpler words like cup, like that thing, hand me that thing you drink coffee out of that you hold the handle with.
It happens to the best of us. It happens to me.
and I brought the petition around, brought it to the library, to the public hearing, had enough signatures, and was successful at keeping the branch open because I had this very strong feeling that everybody, regardless of their economic status, should be able to access a library and knowledge.
That's great. So you had mentioned Dr. King's I-thou relationship. Tell us, what is that, and how does that affect the work that you do today?
Okay, so it's actually Martin Buber's I-thou, but it's very connected to Dr. King's beloved community. It's also very connected to the South African concept of Ubuntu, which means I am a human being through my relationship with other human beings. That's how I am. I am because you are. That is the concept of Ubuntu. That is the concept of I-thou. That is the concept of beloved community. It's the concept that was behind Nelson Mandela when, after 27 years of brutal imprisonment, instead of coming out seeking revenge, he emerged to reconcile with the very people who had brutally oppressed him and other Black and colored, as they call the differentiations in South Africa, people, the majority of the people. and it was exactly that spirit of Ubuntu,
Mm-hmm.
which says, we're all in this ship together. We're gonna sail, or we're gonna sink together.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a very, it's also the kind of, it's at the heart of every faith-based tradition. The idea of being compassionate to others and welcoming.
Mm-hmm.
I actually believe that the Star Wars franchise is so wildly successful globally, and has been for such a long time, because people resonate with this idea of the battle between light, and
Uh-huh.
light being, openness, compassion, caring about the others, in the text, feeding the hungry, clothing the naked, taking care of the elderly, tending to people in prison, versus the forces of dark, and the
Mm-hmm.
dark being territorial, fear mongering,
Mm-hmm.
uh, uh, creating at the least hate, a fear of the other,
Mm-hmm.
in the middle, hatred of the other, and at the very worst, annihilating the other.
Sure.
And so those are the that
It's kind of classic good versus evil, right? I
it,
mean,
it
essentially.
it kind of really is. I mean, in my mind, and I don't I honestly don't mean to be Pollyannish about this, or kumbaya, let's all hold hands and the whole world will get better. It's, there are so many challenges to
Mm-hmm.
staying connected, even to your own core values. Let's start with that. Then staying connected to the people you love the most. I mean, most people are more likely to fight with their spouses and their children or their parents than they are with neighbors or teachers or employers.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so it's there are challenges on the deeply personal level. There are challenges on within whatever kind of institution we work in, whether it's a business, a not-for-profit, a government entity, a multinational, or a very local. There's myriad internal and external challenges of
Mm-hmm.
how we come together.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say that now more than ever, when so many people are in a kind of state of despair about how our divided world, and harbor fears about an unknown future, creating that connectedness is absolutely essential. It's
Mm-hmm.
providing hope in a time of darkness. It's a way of being. I mean,
Yeah.
it's, yeah.
Yeah. I like that. So who are your clients today? What kind of people do you work with?
Oh, so I have clients from all sectors, and all of my work comes, you know, word of mouth, one to the other.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I do work with IMD Business School on executive education programs. I have clients that are multinational corporations. I've worked with Omnicom, I've worked with Coca-Cola, I've worked with Unilever. I have other kind of international entities that I've worked with, like FIFA,
Mm-hmm.
and various UN agencies. I've worked with governments and heads of state. I, in fact, had the honor of working with Nelson Mandela, because during the time that he was in prison, I worked extremely closely with Oliver Tambo. So Tambo was Mandela's law partner.
Mm-hmm.
And when Mandela went to prison, Tambo went into exile and became the president of the African National Congress, a role he played for the 27 years that Mandela was in prison.
Mm-hmm.
So I worked as a senior advisor to the ANC Executive Committee in exile. And
Mm-hmm.
so, therefore, when Mandela was released from prison, he already knew about me, and I had the honor of meeting him just months after his release from prison at his home in Soweto and worked with him through his life
Yeah.
until he retired from public activity.
Wow, that's amazing. That's
Yeah.
amazing.
No, I've been blessed to work with some really, truly extraordinary people, many of whom are exactly what I would call bridging leaders, engagement leaders, masters of connectedness. And he certainly is, at the top of the list.
Yeah. Yeah. So what does a typical engagement look like for you working with a
It
client?
it varies. Everything I do is totally bespoke. I don't have templates for anything because while I believe that everything's interconnected, I also believe that everything's unique and that whether the client is an individual or a part of an organization, like a particular beeline, or the entire organization, whether it's going to be like a one shot, a day long intervention, or whether it's going to be a week-long workshop, or whether it's going to be an 18-month leadership development process, that I do a very intensive discovery process with the would-be client
Mm-hmm.
before we start out.
Mm-hmm.
Because for several reasons. Number one, prospective clients or prior clients who come back again
Mm-hmm.
often come to me believing that X is their problem.
Mm-hmm.
But when we dive into it, we actually find that X is just a
Symptom.
manifestation of a deeper systemic
Sure.
problem. In fact, it's been a good probably close to 2 decades ago that I changed my contracts.
Mm-hmm.
The language of my contracts, where it used to read whereas, and then it would be like, I will deliver X, Y, Z,
Sure.
and I completely changed the wording. And I changed it in two ways that are important, I think, in the context of what we're discussing, the context of mutuality. Number one, the wording switched from what we're working on is ABC to
Mm-hmm.
while we're entering this contract, believing that what we're working on is ABC,
Uh-huh.
our agreement that through the process of our work, we may end up going in other, by our joint agreement, going in
Yeah.
other directions.
Follow the work itself.
Exactly. Follow the work itself, which is
Yeah.
so, so that was the one wording change of contract. And the other wording changes, I always used to put in, whereas, on all the things I would be delivering. And the only thing on their end really was, and you're going to pay me Z amount.
Yep.
And the way I changed it too, because the more I began to see my work as a co-creative process with those I was working with,
Mm-hmm.
I had as many whereases of what I would do.
Mm-hmm.
I had an equal number of whereases of what they need to do. Like, if you want me to, do a particular thing, that added thing, you must give me notice at least 7 days before, or I cannot guarantee that I can do it in the time frame you're asking for.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And when we have our meetings, it's up to you to create the summary notes and
Mm-hmm.
share them with me, because I used to summarize everything and send it to them. And then I thought, I'm not helping them. Like, of course I know I have the insights, but it's the important thing is to uncover, did they get the key takeaways and insights? And if it's their responsibility to write up the summary, which of course then I review and I had, tweak, and I say, don't forget about this. And remember, we wanted to emphasize that. And, then they have ownership in it. They have buy-in to it, which is, all part of connectedness and ownership and buy-in is critical. I mean, just think about the number of strategic plans that, well, first of all, when I arrived at IMD Business School, I learned that 97% of strategic plans fail.
It's no
And that
surprise.
this is not because there aren't smart people creating them. It's that they haven't factored in what it will take to get the buy-in from the people who have to actually execute against the strategic plan to do what the strategy. They somehow have this fantasy that they're going to have like one big meeting. The CEO is going to like share the new vision with everybody, and it's just going to naturally cascade down through, and everybody's just going to like turn on a dime, and and even those who do have some sense of needing a change management process, you usually think of that as like, okay, so it will take us a month to cascade it out, and it's more like 18 months, and it's more like iteratively repeating, and also not just one-way broadcasting, but in involving them in the decision making and in the whole process. We all have a need to be validated. It's so human. It's so fundamental. So
when you added essentially client responsibilities to the contract, and you gave them that kind of equity in the relationship and that responsibility in the relationship, did you find then that your clients had better outcomes from your engagements?
Absolutely.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me at all.
Yeah, I mean, when you have skin in the game, okay, you could say just payment is skin in the game, but payment is one way, and I'm not demeaning or diminishing. And payment is an important form of validation of who you are, what you are. But when you have skin in the game, when let's say I'm doing an individual coaching of a very senior executive, of which I do quite a bit of. I'm talking about people who are at the board level, people who are at the C-suite level. All of my one-on-one coaching these days is at that level. Every now and then, because I have a soft spot for young, enthusiastic people, I'll do, not every now and then, I'll often do more what I'll call mentoring for young. And then, by the way, even that is a two-way street, because I'm mentoring them with decades of wisdom. They're mentoring me with fonts of knowledge that they have about the internet and social media and things that I am totally clueless about. So we're both learning from each other, and it's mutually beneficial. So we each have in the game. But absolutely with someone whose time is precious, just as my time is precious, their time is precious.
Yeah.
When I demand of them, I think demand is too strong of a word, but when I encourage them strongly to write up after each one of our coaching sessions the key takeaway insights they have and what next action steps they're planning to do based on our discussion, and send it to me within a week. And I will extend that if they're like about to launch, that week, their major global conference. It's negotiable, but it's like sooner than later while it's fresh. By my encouraging them to do that, it actually deepens their level of being engaged in the coaching process. It definitely increases the likelihood that they hold on to the insights they get. Because think about it. I mean, in coaching and also in life, I mean, just in everyday conversations, it's easy to have an epiphany moment where all of a sudden, someone says something and you go, wow, that's just what I need, or that's just what I want, or that's just what I should do. And
Hmm.
then the epiphany moment comes and goes. It
Hmm.
disappears because like life hits us the minute we get out of that particular discussion, that
Hmm.
coaching call. We're, assaulted in from every direction now with incoming other. And by the time we even think about, like, which might be the day before the next coaching session, we've forgotten 99% of what we learned. So
Back
I
day to
have
day.
seen
Yeah.
absolutely, and my clients tell me, they thank me for it. They thank me for pushing them to do it. They say, you can be a real nag about that, but it's a good nag because I'm actually getting something out of this. I've done coaching before. I've had,
Hmm.
and it's like it all felt good while it was happening, but I didn't seem to really change anything. And with
Hmm.
you, I'm actually changing my behavior because you're like making me take responsibility for it.
Hmm. Yeah. Interesting. So with your most of your coaching or consulting or connecting at this point is done at the C-suite or the board level. Are you
Yeah.
doing typically one-on-one engagements, or do you do work with groups?
I still work with teams, deep
Yeah.
dive teams with, groups of sometimes 6, sometimes 30.
Hmm.
Um, I'd say, I'd say I used to do more of the larger, groups of teams of
Hmm.
6 to 30,
Sure.
and less of the one-on-one. And probably in recent years, that's shifted so that I'm doing more of the senior one-on-one and still doing, but lesser of the group team. I like to keep doing both because I find that the dynamic is different, and it's important for me to keep sharp my skills and abilities to read a dynamic of a team in real time, so that
Mhm.
when I'm working also with individuals and they're describing what's going on in their teams, I have the experiential, the recent experiential knowledge, not just decades of experiential knowledge of how teams, how they sabotage themselves or each other, how they, who takes over when, why, how. So
Mhm.
I like to keep all of those skills fresh.
Yeah. Was that a natural shift for you, or was it a purposeful shift in direction you said more recently you've been working
Yeah,
more one with C-suite and board executive types?
I have to answer that question both and rather than either or.
Sure. Yeah.
It was natural in that, well, particularly during this last year,
Mhm.
uh, well, year plus, since
Sure.
the last group program I led in France was the last week of February 2020.
Mhm.
How did when we now know the virus was like running. I was in Paris, and we now know that was like the hotbed of the virus at that exact moment. And had
Yeah.
that workshop been scheduled for a week later, it absolutely would have been canceled. But
Yeah.
we were in it while it was the news was just beginning to come out, and so we
Yeah.
were like, nobody was shaking hands, and I'm a real hugger, so it was, but uh, we were keeping distance, and but it was before mask. It was,
Yeah.
um,
You may have
and
dodged a bullet there.
there's a reason I just went on that sidebar story. You have to remind me of what your underlying question was that led me there.
Sure. So, I mean, it was just we are kind of talking about that being both a natural shift and also a purposeful
Thank you.
shift.
Okay,
Yeah.
so after that last February 2020, COVID, and everything went online,
Hmm.
more of the team stuff
Hmm.
and group stuff got canceled.
Yep. Yeah.
And it was more individuals who wanted to just keep going because with individuals, they're already used to working with me online. It
Hmm.
doesn't matter if they're based in Singapore or
Hmm.
they're based in Helsinki or I mean, I really have clients from like all regions of the world. So it didn't matter. It was something we were comfortable doing. We'd been doing already. There were one or two programs that shifted from being in person to being online.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, that required, as everybody did a learning curve. How do you do the equivalent of breakout groups, and how do
Mm-hmm.
you maintain and build an intimacy among the team so that they can have the greatest degree of discovery. So
Mm-hmm.
it was something that was probably accelerated by what I experienced during COVID and
Yeah.
recognizing that I enjoy it more. Now I say this, I'm doing a 1-day workshop online this Friday.
Mm-hmm.
And then next week, I'll be doing my first since February 2020 in person week long group
That's
team.
exciting.
Yeah, it is exciting. I'm excited about it.
Yeah.
And I kind of feel like a schoolgirl. I'm excited and it's funny. I've done this so many times. It's not like I could probably not do any preparation
Sure.
but I am so obsessive and I overwork everything, and so I will like completely immerse myself in it and with preparatory work and make sure I know, as much as I can about everybody in the team and what the team's dealing with and what each individual's dealing with. So I walk in on day one,
Mm-hmm.
but still, so it's not that I'm nervous that I don't know what to do. It's just I haven't done it in so long.
Mm-hmm.
It feels like the first day of school, like kindergarten.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like I'm going in and what is it
Feeling
going to
kind
be?
of giddy.
Yeah. Excuse me?
I said feeling kind of giddy.
Yeah, I am.
I think that's the old phrase is giddy as a schoolgirl, right?
Giddy as
Giddy.
a schoolgirl. Yeah.
That's great. That's great. So it sounds like you've had, quite a successful career, quite, some interesting life experiences, hanging out, spending time with Nobel laureates, meeting Nelson Mandela,
Yeah.
leading teams all around the world, including in France right before COVID exploded. Tell us a little bit more about your book. Is there any autobiography in there? Any fun stories, or is it pretty focused? Is it going to be pretty focused on just coaching and consulting?
So I'm going to say what I've heard from every author who's ever written a book who I know is the book keeps revealing itself to me as I write it.
Yeah.
Um, I started out with the intent that it was going to be chapters on this is how you do this is how you do, and that
Hmm.
my stories, my experiences would be woven in. As I'm writing it, it appears to be in its current iteration because it's gone through so many changes. It's
Hmm.
more like memoir. Here's my life and what I did, and these are the lessons that were gleaned from it. So it started out lessons to be gleaned, and here's some life experience to support it. Right now, it's more like here's a life story and some lessons to be gleaned from it. So it's
Hmm.
going to be, I think it's going to land somewhere in the middle, like a melange, where it's not memoir, but nor is it how to.
Hmm.
It's something, and I don't yet know exactly what that will be.
That seems to be a theme for you. Is kind of creating your own path out of taking a couple different traditional paths and maybe creating some kind of amalgamation from different things.
Oh, that's a very insightful comment. I never thought of it, but it's very true.
Yeah, yeah. Just from some of the
Very true.
stories you've told.
I've often said I have the most nonlinear life of anybody I know.
There you
In
go.
other words, I didn't start at this level here and then elevate. I didn't keep getting promotions. It's like
Yeah.
I've worked in I was a community organizer. I worked at the United Nations. I'm the CEO of a business. I've been a professor at several universities. I've worn so many different hats and done so many different types of things and worked in so many different sectors. But to me, there's again, the connective thread through all of it is
Mhm.
in each one, I was finding ways to make the connections. And in fact,
Mhm.
having been in so many sectors, I often like I'll learn about something that's happening out here
Mhm.
from like some NGO, and then something that's happening here from some business, you know, chief operating officer, and then I'll something
Mhm.
done here that I learned from a head of a UN agency, and they seem to be like very disparate activities. And I'll go, oh my
Yeah.
God, if I introduce that person to that person to that person, wow, what a powerhouse, and how much greater the whole will be than the sum of the parts. And
Yeah.
I do that like breathing. I mean, probably several times a day, I'm sending out what I call e-intros, like you and you. Here's a paragraph on each of you and why I think you should connect. Now I'm leaving it in your hands. Do whatever you want with it.
I love it. Talk amongst yourselves.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. So you're clearly a very successful, remarkable coach. You've had a successful career. What sort of failures or learning points have you had over the course of your career? When maybe things haven't gone wrong, but maybe you've just a point in your career. Maybe give us a story or two where you've really learned something and changed the way that you maybe the way that you behaved or the way that you conducted business in a significant way.
Oh, my failures are myriad, multitudinous. Um, where to begin? I'll just go through some of them, not even necessarily in the order of importance, but how they come to my
Sure,
brain.
that's perfect.
Um, this one is kind of a chronological one. Early on, when I created my own consulting business,
Hmm.
um, I didn't really have the sense of vetting the client as seriously as they vetted me.
Hmm.
And now, and it's, this has only grown in all the 20 plus years since I started the business. I now more seriously vet my clients than they vet me.
Hmm.
Like I have, I had too many experiences where an initial meeting, there was a good feeling. They said what it is they wanted me to do. And
Hmm.
then the moment I signed a contract, I became, in their eyes, their slave. And whatever, and I should be, if they sent me an email at 11 p.m.
Yeah.
asking me something, I would get a pissy email at 1 a.m. asking, how come you haven't answered my 11 p.m.? And I was just
Wow.
astounded by the degree to which clients could not have a mutual respect, but feel that once they were paying you, you were no longer a peer, you were a peon.
Yeah.
So I had to work with a lot of clients that I did not enjoy the process of working with them at all.
Yeah.
Um, so that, but learning that early was good because it made it clearer to me that
Hmm.
I only want to work with people who I believe are genuinely going to do what they, want to achieve. Like, for example, one of the areas, I mean, that I'm particularly well known for is corporate social responsibility.
Hmm.
And there was a time when a big multinational communications firm, they will remain unnamed for now.
Sure.
The CEO told me that he wanted them to expand their corporate social responsibility initiatives and asked me to meet with their EVP at their headquarters.
Hmm.
And I met with him, and he had this magnificent corner office, glass and steel, 180-degree view of the Manhattan skyline, because there's a media company, 50 wide screens with simultaneously broadcasting all of their networks. And he just gushed effusively about how much they were excited about doing this and how thrilled they were that I was, going to do. And then he said, okay, so now I'd like you to go downstairs and meet with the woman who runs our corporate responsibility program.
Mm-hmm.
So I left this, very lush, lavish, and I went. Yeah, and his office was surrounded by, like a circle of people who exclusively worked for him.
Yeah.
And then I went down to this woman's office and I entered a closet-sized room
Uh-huh.
with no window.
Uh-huh.
Just the minute I walked in,
Yeah.
just the room said everything. They're not
Mhm.
serious. And then as I started to talk to her, she actually had brilliant, wonderful ideas of what she'd been wanting to do and asking them to do, and was really, really smart, and didn't even have one part-time person fully assigned to her. She had one part-time person who serviced several other people in the business. So she was like essentially on her own with a minuscule amount of support, no resources at all.
Mm-hmm.
And I just had to get back to the CEO and say, I can't do this with you because you're not serious about it.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, call me when you are ready to resource this. And when I say resource it, I don't mean pay me. Resource your own internal company to do what it is you're saying you want to do, because I'm not window dressing. I'm not going to help you do window dressing.
Yeah, that's a classic case of actions speak louder than words, and the fact that they had one gal running that and she was in a small closet space, that tells you what you need to know, huh?
Yeah.
Interesting. So I'm curious to know what does vetting a client for you, what does that look like? What's involved in that process?
I like to have at least one pre-call if it happens to be in a geographic region where we can meet face to face, but if not, a Skype call, a Zoom call, usually more than one. I'll ask them a set of questions. I'll send them questions before we even begin, to clarify their goals and what their anticipated time frame is, that they think that they're going to achieve these goals, what resources they believe they're going to need to get from their company in order to achieve those goals, but kind of a blueprint. And I mean, people who don't take the time to answer those things, I don't have a second call with them, because it comes back to what we talked about earlier: skin in the game, ownership, buy-in. You're only ever going to get out of anything the degree that you invest yourself in it. That's another form of connectedness. When you invest yourself in something, it increases the likelihood that the return on the investment is going to be really worth it. But when you don't invest yourself, it's like, it's a coin toss. And frankly, it's not worth my time. It doesn't merit my time if you, the prospective client, are not taking seriously how you're approaching your future and what you're asking me to do to help you approach your future. Because if you're not looking at it seriously and you're not willing to do the work to show me that you're looking at it seriously, then why waste each other's time? Just so that you can check a box to say, we hired a consultant to do a review, we hired a coach to help this person advance.
throwing money at the problem is not the same as taking responsibility for the problem and actually
Bingo.
investing energy into it, right? Energy is
Yep.
different than throwing money at the problem. Yeah, that's
Energy is really everything, and
yeah.
it's why also it's when I talk about connectedness, that in and of itself is a form of energy.
Hmm.
You know how when you connect deeply to
Hmm.
someone, it's like the whole vibrational level goes up.
Yep.
And also when there's somehow a blockage, when someone
Hmm.
is guarded and you can't find a way to connect to them, the energy drops.
Sure.
Um, I mean, that's just a day-to-day experience that every human being has, regardless of what they do. But certainly in a coaching and consulting capacity, um, I'm going to do everything from my side to keep the energy level as high as I'm going to give you my whole self.
Yeah.
Uh, but I'm going to ask you to give me your whole self.
Yeah.
And when you're holding it back, I'm going to let you know.
Yeah.
And if you don't change, I'm also going to let you know that while I believe I could help you get to
Hmm.
where you want to, I don't think you're going to get there because you're not investing enough.
Hmm.
And I am very straightforward and tell it like it is with my clients, like that. I am that direct with them.
Hmm.
Um, but I think it's because I'm also so compassionate, empathetic, understanding as they're going through things that they're willing to take that kind of tough medicine from me because they know I'm not just being provocative. I'm it's part and parcel of, look, I'm going to nurture and hold you and help you and support you and do everything I can to
Hmm.
make your dream a reality.
Yeah.
But when you're not doing your share, I'm going to hold your feet to the fire.
Yeah.
And when you're shirking your responsibility with me, or when I see you shirking your responsibility, when you're complaining about something that's going on in the office and
Hmm.
you're laying it on someone else, and I'll call out like, what's your part in this little pas de deux that's happening between you and this other person? Like, how are you feeding into it? Because like you
Hmm.
can't control that person's behavior. In fact, you can't control anything that's on the outside. I mean, you can think you can try to, but I mean, the only thing you can control, and that's if you work really hard at it, is how you react to any given situation or given personality. And so, what are you doing? And I hold people to, I think I'm proud that I do that. And my clients appreciate that I do that. And they come back for more and they send people to me because of it.
Hmm. Fascinating. Yeah, that's good stuff. So in terms of the vetting, then it sounds like primarily you're vetting them through discovery calls and
Mhm.
making sure that they're set up to be able to work with you, right? They're
Yeah.
ready to roll.
Yeah. Discovery calls and some willingness to write up like what it is that why
Uh-huh.
they're wanting to enter into an engagement, what it
Yeah.
is they're hoping to achieve, and willingness to put the time into. I know it's not going to be a final. I mean, that's actually my job, is to help them distill down the
Sure.
clarity of what their goals actually are.
But you need
And
to find out. You need to make sure that they're ready to do the work because they have to do the work too, right? You're the guide. They're the hero. They're the ones doing the work.
it's all about them. I mean,
Yeah.
I I feel great when they succeed. I feel sad when they don't.
Hmm.
And it's always clear to me why in both cases.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Interesting. I want to be conscious of the time here. Just got maybe a couple more questions for you, if that's all right.
Sure.
For just in general, for newer coaches who are maybe not at the level that you're at, what general guidance or suggestions or tips might you give someone who's a little earlier on in their career?
The single most important piece is it's not your job to tell other people what they should do.
Mm-hmm.
It's your job to help them uncover, unearth from within themselves
Mm-hmm.
the knowledge they already have that may not have reached a conscious level of what it is they want to do and need to do.
Mm-hmm.
It's your job to empower, to pull out of them, to ask the provocative questions, but to ask them, calibrate, because as you work with people, you'll be able to tell who can take it, right on the chin, like, well, did you talk to your boss about that?
Mm-hmm.
Or have you maybe considered the possibility that you could talk to your boss about that? There's different ways, of course, of phrasing a question, but the whole idea, and even that question is not a good example of a question, because it should not, as much as possible, it should be open-ended. Like, what do you think might
Yeah.
be your best next step? And
If
then
I
when they
maybe
mention the boss, then it's, well, have have you talked to him or about it? And you keep, because there's this delicious moment for your coachee
mm-hmm.
when all of a sudden they go, oh, light bulb, I get
Mm-hmm.
it. And it actually could be something that you realize 7 sessions earlier. Like you reckon, like as soon as they began to talk to you, you could have been like, I'm not the repairman. Like I
Right.
could come in, they could tell me the problem. I say, okay, here's what you do. Tap here, pull there. No, that's not helping them. But when I can guide them, when you as a coach can guide your coachees by asking them questions to find within themselves the answers.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying that not to guide at all. Your questions, you can have a directional sense. You can you can have in your mind what you hope they might be able to see, but you
Mm-hmm.
also have to be like really unattached to your own perspective of it, because they might come up with something way better
Mm-hmm.
or different. And every person approaches things differently. And so you have to be responsive to that person. Like, that's why I say everything is bespoke. It's not template.
Sure.
Um, I think that's the single most important thing that I would say. And a part and parcel in that is like learning how to use clean language, learning how to ask open-ended questions versus closed. And like, did you do this, is a yes or no
Yeah.
answer. What are the ways you might do? What are some of the things you might do? Is an open, it gives them the opportunity to explore.
I think it's important to think of yourself as a guide who's helping them get to the answer that they already possess. And like you said,
Exactly.
you may have seen the answer 7 sessions ago, but if you just tell it to them, they're not going to have they're not going to possess the
Yeah,
answer, right?
that's absolutely, you've got it.
If
Spot
you
on.
can guide them to the answer that they already know, but they just haven't found it yet, if you
Yeah.
can guide them to that, then they will own that outcome themselves.
I call that the golden nuggets of truth that are inside of each
That's
person.
great.
And I'm like the miner helping
Hmm.
them, you know, let those golden nuggets come to the surface.
Yeah, that's great. What about marketing tips? How do you have any tips for new coaches who are trying to get new leads, new clients, that
So
sort of thing?
interestingly enough, I've never spent a penny on marketing.
Hmm.
All of my work has been word of mouth.
Hmm.
But so, and remember, so I've been working over 4 decades plus.
Yep.
Um, oh, that little sidebar threw me. What was the underlying question again?
Marketing.
Marketing. Thank you. So when I say word of mouth, when I began, word of mouth was literally word of mouth.
Yep.
That, someone would call me up and say, so and so told me about the work you did with them. They
Mm-hmm.
said I absolutely had to meet you. Or a person would call me directly and said, so and so told me I absolutely had to. And that was like how all my business came.
Mm-hmm. So essentially networking, right? You meeting
And that's
people,
the
knowing people, connect.
relationship, my whole shtick, connectedness,
Yep.
people, relationships. Now, what became interesting is, okay, you already know by my age that I am so far from being a digital native, it's ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
However, in 2009, I had my epiphany moment, which was I really need to learn how to engage with and interact on the internet, in social media, on blogs, in podcasts, because computer or internet illiterate today is the equivalent of being reading illiterate 50 years ago. And I had to push myself because it did not come naturally. And it was interesting because I had already been telling for some time all of my clients and my graduate students, while I was still based in New York, I taught grad courses at NYU. I was constantly telling them, you can use the internet to amplify the work you're doing.
Yeah.
And at this session, if it was a class, I brought in the expert who will share with you how to do that. Or with my
Mm-hmm.
client, I would say, you should be doing this, and I'm going to connect you to the expert who will be doing this. But I wasn't doing it myself. And one day I woke up and said, Nadine, you've always been about talk the talk, not just walk. Yeah, walk the walk, not just talk the talk.
Yep.
So you've got to do it. And it was 2000. I'm forgetting if it's 7 or 9. 2009, I believe. I was going to Liberia for a major international women's conference. And my younger staff, my 20s something staff were begging me, Nadine, you've got to post a blog about and I was like, so blog. And they said, no, it's just like email. It's just a different thing. We'll show you. It'll take 2 seconds. And so when I went to that conference, my first post was, my first line of my first post was, I am a blog virgin. And then, but I then, created a Facebook profile and a LinkedIn profile and a Twitter profile, and more recently an Instagram profile, because again, it's my whole view is it's always in the doing
Mm-hmm.
that you learn things. It's not by reading a manual.
Mm-hmm.
And it was in the doing of engaging on social media that I saw that what I had been naturally doing all my life in terms of building and sustaining relationships could be put on steroids.
Mm-hmm.
And so at a certain point it shifted. And when I would ask people, how did you come to me, or how did you hear about me? I'd get some version of, well, whether I searched for the issue I care about or I searched for the service I need, you came out on the top of my search.
Yeah.
And so I realized that that it is, so all of that long-winded marketing, you do need to keep a social presence. And social presence does not mean one-way marketing.
Mm-hmm.
It means engaging with others.
Yep. 100%.
Like, I have a couple of people who I know well who send out like these regular email, read my latest article, see my latest, but they never answer any of my things. So I just, at this point, I delete them because they're one-way broadcasters. They're not engagers.
Yeah.
So in my social media, like, yeah, I'll definitely, when this goes live, I'll definitely do a link and say, watch my interview with, on the Remarkable Coach podcast.
Yeah.
But in the interim, I will have said, you've got to see my friend, you got to buy my friend Nick's new book on Better Before Bigger. It's a brilliant business book, and in between that, I'll be retweeting other people's, oh, it's so great that you're doing this.
Mm-hmm.
So be social, be the social part of social media, be social, engage, interact.
Mm-hmm.
And that presence is important.
And it sounds like with your blog posts, you had some good search engine optimization as well. If people are searching for whatever it was they were needing, and they found you.
Okay, so all of that I can't take credit for whatsoever. I had my webmaster do all the behind the scenes, so yeah, that stuff is way above my pay grade.
Fantastic. Well, Nadine, I think we're coming up on time here, but I want to thank you so much for joining us. Is there anything that you would like to add that I didn't touch upon before we close out?
No, I feel like we had a really good exchange, and I guess if I'd say anything, it's like, we talked about King, we talked about Mandela.
Mm.
I just want to say it would be defeatist to think that you have to be an extraordinary person like one of them to form engaged relationships.
Sure.
You just need to make the effort. And being an engagement leader today, I think, is so important. And this is our chance to shine in a dark world that desperately needs light. So, go out, engage, and shine, and bring light to the world.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Nadine Hack, future author of The Power of Connectedness. Thank you so much for joining us on The Remarkable Coach.
My pleasure. Current author, future to be published.
There it is. There it is. Thank you for correcting me on that. That's perfect. All right. Thank you so much. Thank you to our listeners and viewers for watching and listening, and we'll see you guys next time.
Bye-bye.